Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to make these delicious breakfast bread rolls. They got a nice tender crust and on the inside they have a soft and fluffy crumb. The best part though, there is absolutely no kneading involved. And if you want to know how this works, stick around, you definitely don't want to miss this. For our bread rolls, we need only a couple of ingredients: all-purpose flour, cold water, a tiny bit of yeast, salt and olive oil. I know I heard it many times. Some people are just afraid to handle yeast. But I promise you, after watching this video, your reservation to make a dough with yeast is going to lower significantly. For this recipe we need the tiniest bit of yeast. This is just the size of a pea, which equals 1 gram. I toss it in and I dissolve it in the cold water. There are some factors that contribute to a perfect dough, and one is to knead the dough really well. Since I'm not going to knead at all, I have to manage time and temperature. That will help me to get the same result as I would have with a well-kneaded dough. To make that happen, I have to extend the fermentation process over a large amount of time, and that I control with a tiny amount of yeast and the cold water. After dissolving the yeast, I put in the olive oil. I give everything a quick whisk before I put in the dry ingredients, which are the flour and the salt. So the only thing I'm going to do now is that I make sure that the dry and the wet ingredients are completely incorporated. This just takes a minute and you can use either a dough card like I do here, or you just use your hands. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to explain why the large time frame is of the essence. The gluten structure makes your dough stable and elastic. This is usually done by kneading. Skipping the kneading part means the dough is going to develop its gluten structure over time and all by itself. That process starts as soon as the flour comes in contact with water. I would simply put it this way. You start about an hour before you go to bed, and when you wake up 8 hours later, the dough is exactly where you want it to be. The tiny amount of yeast and the cold water slow down the fermentation as well, so that the dough does not overproof. When the flour is completely incorporated, you cover it with a lid or a plastic foil to prevent it from drying out, and let it rest overnight at room temperature. The perfect room temperature would be between 20 and 22 degrees of Celsius, which equals 68 to 72 degrees of Fahrenheit. In this case, the fermentation takes about 8 to 9 hours. If your room temperature is colder than that, the fermentation might take a little longer. And if your room temperature is warmer than that, then the fermentation process is going to speed up. In the latter case, I advise you to monitor the dough a little closer because you don't want it to overproof. So my preparation is done and it took me exactly 3 minutes. Now it's time to give it a good night's rest, and let's see what happens next morning. The next morning, my dough has doubled in size, and all these little air pockets tell me that the yeast has done its job. That means I can start shaping the bread rolls. I dust the countertop with some flour, and then I take out the dough. At this point the dough is quite soft and sticky, and so I just put a little tiny bit of flour on it to be able to handle it a little better. As you can see, the dough is quite elastic and flexible, and that's exactly how I want it to be. I fold it over 2 times and then I start cutting off my bread rolls. From this amount I get 8 to 9 bread rolls, which weigh about 90 to 100 grams, and that equals 3 ounces. So once I divided the dough into my bread rolls, I start shaping them. But before I do that, I wanted to show you how nicely the gluten structure has developed. As you can see, you can stretch the dough into paper thin layers and it has really gotten elastic. So when I shape them, I take the edge, I gently stretch it first and then I take it back to the middle and press down gently. The reason why I shape them this way is to create tension on the surface. That helps to keep the gases inside and make them rise really nice. So one more time, first I push out the air and make them flat, and then I grab the edges and I gently stretch, take them back to the middle and press down gently. Once I shaped them all, I cover them with a kitchen towel and I let them rest for 30 to 45 minutes. In the meantime, I heat up the oven and some kind of cake form or pan. You can use whatever you have at home which can resist the heat. And the reason why we need that, I'm going to explain in a minute. My bread rolls have rested for a little more than half an hour and they have risen really nicely. I score the bread rolls with a sharp knife with either 1 cut or maybe 2 to make them look a little different. I bake my bread rolls on a pizza stone and I put them on parchment paper and I load them into the oven on a pizza peel. But don't worry, your cake tray is as good as my choice. I spray them a little to give them a nice shine. Now back to the pan. To create a steamy environment in the oven, I heat up some kind of baking form or pan as well. And when it's finally time to put the bread rolls in, I fill half a cup of hot water to pour it in the hot baking form. That creates a lot of steam, and then just make sure to close the door immediately to keep the steam inside. Then I reduce the heat about 10% to 225 degrees Celsius and I bake the bread rolls for about 20 minutes. The time span I gave you is depending on your oven. Ovens tend to cheat, and you know your oven best. So judge from the color of the bread rolls and you know when it's time to take them out. They should have a golden brown crust and the underside of the bread roll should be golden brown as well. And now I let you listen to how a breakfast bread roll should sound like. And that's what it looks on the inside. It has a really nice, fluffy and porous crumb and it tastes so good. And trust me, no one would notice the difference between this bread roll and a bread roll from a bakery. Only that this is so much better. So, what do you think? Please leave a comment and let me know. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to this channel and you like my content, I'd be happy if you support me by clicking the subscribe button. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!